Okay, so hello, welcome. It's a real privilege to welcome you to this event. It's lovely to see so many people in the flesh, so to speak. It's been a really difficult time for us all, like working through trying to get back to being together. Please come in, don't worry, we're just doing intros. Hi. So I'm Professor Carey Jewitt, and I'm the chair of the UCL's Collaborative Social Science domain. Hi, just come on in. And I'm really delighted to invite you to the Collaborative Social Science domain annual lecture for 2024. So what is the domain? It's basically at UCL, sitting above departments and faculties, we have a set of domains. I think there's 8 of them, possibly 9. And their purpose is to bring people together from across the different departments and faculties so that we don't get kind of siloed into our spaces, and also to kind of really foster collaborative working across different disciplines. That's the function of our domain. So we foreground social science and the value of social scientists collaborating with other disciplines. So I, for example, work with engineers and computer scientists. Some of the work that Jessica's done has worked with people from crime and security at UCL. So we're trying to build different links across all of our departments. And we want to do that because we think it makes really good social research. And one of the unique things about UCL is our social scientists, our sociologists and our other social researchers are in practically every, please come in, it's fine, come in, are in every department and faculty across UCL. So we're everywhere, which is a great place to be. And the domain tries to bring us together as well. And so I'd like to thank Sage, our colleagues at Sage Publishing, and they sponsor our annual lecture, which is really important for us. And they also work with us to disseminate the event, to bring people together, and also to host the digital legacy of it, the recording of this event. And our last annual lecture, I had a look just before I came, has had nearly 40,000 views around globally. And so it's a really nice way for us to kind of push out, hi, come in, no worries, come in. Right. And so I'm just going to give you a brief introduction to the topic of our talk, the speaker, and our discussants that we have, and the format for today, just so you know what's going to unfold. Okay, so this event is also part of the ESRC Social Science Festival, because their theme this year is digital life. So we're badging this under that bigger kind of swathe of work that's happening across lots of universities, including UCL. So our lecture is titled Growing Up Digital, and I'm delighted, really delighted to have my colleague, Professor Jessica Ringrose, who's going to be giving us our talk, and I'll give her a brief introduction just to embarrass you slightly. So, Jessica is Professor of Sociology of Gender and Education in the Education, Practice and Society Department at IOE, which is UCL's Faculty of Education and Social Sciences. And she's an expert in youth digital cultures and technology, and how technology facilitates violence and abuse, and has conducted numerous research projects and written really extensively and, in my opinion, very powerfully about this topic. And her most recent research, which I was just looking at today, it's so amazing. I just encourage you to look at Jessica's profile online. She's written recently around how technologies facilitate body shaming, image-based sexual abuse, gender-based violence among young people, and the need to equip young people to navigate this tumultuous landscape. And she offers us ways forward via digital defence and activism, and kind of trying to find ways forward for young people through this difficult space. And I was very pleased and proud that the Collaborative Social Science domain funded some very early seed work that Jessica did that brought her together with a quantitative scholar from the Department of Security and Crime at UCL. And that project explored children unsolicited sexual images on social media apps towards developing a better digital defences and literacy. And you can hear Jessica as well on a podcast which is on the UCL Collaborative Social Science domain website, talking about the power and the use of doing collaborative research. So we're a big fan. And you will be too, if you haven't heard Jessica speak by the end of this. And so Jessica's going to talk for about 30 minutes, and that will be followed by short responses from 3 stellar discussants who I'm delighted to welcome to UCL this evening. So Professor Sonia Livingstone, who's a Professor of Social Psychology from the Department of Media and Communications at the London School of Economics and Political Science, LSE. Professor Andy Phippen, oh, no. Thank you, Phippen, who's a Professor of IT Ethics and Digital Rights at Bournemouth University. And last but not least, Dr. Lucia Gloria Vazquez Rodriguez, who's a lecturer in digital media production here at UCL. Come on in, that's fine, come in. Yeah. And they'll each give a 5-minute response to Jessica's lecture at the end. And then I'll introduce them a little bit more fully so you know who's talking to you. And that will be followed by a panel discussion for 15 minutes with them interacting, and then a Q&A with you. Followed by a drinks reception to which you are all cordially invited, and I hope you'll stay. So now, Jessica, thank you.
It's such a privilege and an honor to be here with you today. Thank you so much for coming. I know how busy everyone is, and it's a real struggle to stay this late, so I really appreciate it and hope the wine will be some compensation when we finally get to that. Also, thank you for coming on what is a terrible day, a dreary, horrible, tear-evoking kind of day where we think, well, what will be the end of this situation? We don't know, but I know my colleagues were drinking in the pub previous because they're just like, we can't even go to a lecture. I did not drink previous, but it's a pretty sad day. But I then felt, well, it's really important that as a feminist scholar, I'm here and I'm gonna tell you what I think about things, and the issues that we're going to talk about will all strongly relate to what's happened in the past 24 hours. So what is the moment that we're in? How are we meant to face all of the issues related to big tech as coercive forces collide globally? Will we really be able to influence tech design, and how? With these companies having the income of nation states, how will they be regulated? How does all of this impact our understandings of growing up digital? I'm going to take you through some of the repeating media panics and headlines that we see responding to digital technology, and basically sort of outlining how problematic this panic approach is. Then we're going to have a note of pragmatic reason, where I'm going to talk about Sonia's research in this space and around the need for digital literacy, which I think is really important for the hopelessness that we might be feeling today, because education is such an important way forward out of some of these conflicts, we hope. I'm going to talk about the concept of post-digital, which is what was branded in the talk. I wasn't allowed to have it in the title. It's too weird, but I'm going to talk about it, and that will become a provocation and hopefully some point of debate as to whether you think it's a useful concept or not. How might we do post-digital research that really accounts for how technology is shaping our lives? Please come in. I'm sorry it's so hot in here. I was like, I might have to start disrobing, which is just like, I am so hot. So I don't know if we can turn the temperature down or get some aircon because it is really hot with all these people, but anyway, hopefully you're okay. And yeah, my big concern, as with many of you, is probably how can we empower youth to manage all of these contexts of risk and harm, but also what kinds of opportunities can we be thinking about. Okay, so this just happened. This is the moment that we're in. This richest man in the world owns formerly Twitter, now X. He was with Trump last night. I woke up at 5 because I was like, what's happening? Waking up periodically. I'm sure we're all totally exhausted today. And this story was trending on Twitter that Elon Musk had changed X's like button to celebrate Donald Trump's win. And apparently it's some kind of like badge thing they can do. But people were like, it's real, it's happening. And it just shows you the kind of like problematic dynamics of social media, right? That has the power to kind of like do that. And that's not something we're choosing to do. That's something that the platform, that's the affordance and the feature the platform's forcing us into. That's just his rocket. And we're just like, let's send them off, like, if we have any really hard moments, I'll just come back to this slide and you can imagine the two of them heading up into the yonder and maybe never coming back. Yeah, I don't even know what else to say. This is me. In case you don't know, Carey really lovely, gave me a very lovely introduction. I've been in England for 20 years. I am Canadian, not American. There's a lot of memes about the whole cast of Friends looking through some bars today, like what's happening in America. And I've been here for 20 years, but I have actually spent 17 years studying social media, which I was just like, wow. So I'm going to take you through a little tour of some of these findings, because some of them are quite funny now, about what we were finding back in the day. But I do a lot of impact work. I'm so happy the National Education Union policy person's here. Where are you? Yay, Georgina! I work with teachers. I work with teachers' associations. I work with anyone who will listen to me about trying to empower young people around these kinds of issues. Oh, here's me going around. Sonia, this is actually the NSPCC launch way back in the day. Yeah, remember how scared I was of that conservative politician? It hasn't gone away. But this is just me going around doing stuff, which is, part of what we need to be doing as academics to try and change the world. So whose responsibility is social media? Is it, I've already started talking about this, is it tech companies? Is it social media apps? Is it the government? Is it the legal system? Schools, caregivers, young people? Is it everybody? Just a point I want us to think about. There's been so many panics over the social media companies. I went back to a PowerPoint from 2019. There was a panic over Facebook and disinformation. I don't think that got resolved. In fact, we've just seen more and more misinformation and disinformation through various social media platforms. There was an Instagram crisis back in 2019, wasn't going to allow graphic images. There was a child sexual exploitation panic in 2019 over Snapchat. That these messages that self-destruct are allowing groomers to avoid detection. Well, fast forward, this happened when I was with Sonia and some people last week. It's the same thing over again. Like, what didn't you learn from 2019? So it's like, I think Andy's going to be talking about this. It's just the same panic, the same message over and over and over again. And really you kind of get to the point of like, you're not actually going to be able to regulate these tech companies because they're profit oriented. It's a capitalist market economy. And so we need other solutions. We've got the Instagram teen accounts and the dumb phones, which Andy has usefully told us here. young people are going to end up using smartphones in their social and working lives. They have useful features, so it makes sense for them to learn to use them with the support of the adults in a nurturing environment. Thank you.
Very sensible.
Thank you, Andy. I'm not sure that the dumb phones are going to really work, nor do critics really think that these Instagram teen accounts are going to be that helpful. I work in the sex education zone. There's plenty of panic over porn and online, and this just drives people insane about how young people are, finding and watching pornography and what it's going to do to them. And this is also the zone that I work in, is sex education. And these kind of technology panics have actually also pushed the restrictions on the sex education curriculum. So they have very wide-reaching effects across many different disciplinary or curricular domains. But this is the sort of end point here, where we're seeing this mass, pretty global push towards mobile phone banning. And this is a very interesting group, the smartphone-free childhood. They're actually really anti-capitalist, and I have a wonderful dissertation student, Moses, from our PGT program, who did an incredible master's thesis this summer, Teachers in the Dialectics of Phone Bans, Experiences of Phone Ban Implementation in England. This was by Laura Kursoff. And she looked at how the smartphone technologies exemplify surveillance capitalism, data extraction, and she also looked at Neil Selwyn's new book, which is coming out, about digital degrowth. So we're in a moment of a really live debate. What is the answer? Are we supposed to ban this technology? Are we supposed to, to what degree do we regulate it? So Sonia's team, or people that I assume are your people out of LSE, have just released a report showing that mobile phone banning is inconclusive. And while some regulation might be helpful, complete bans may be completely counterproductive. And it's pretty much unknown at this point how many schools are using the banning policies and to what degree and how they're playing out. And I just put in a research proposal to study this because I do think it's actually incredibly important that we understand what is the impact. And especially for me, is if you ban the phone, then do you sort of take away the need for enhanced digital literacy? And I would argue no. So if we turn to Sonia and her advice on digital literacy with her colleague Amanda Third, blocking or reducing social media is not a long-term or viable solution. Increase media literacy and education around different social media platforms, and specifically things that upskill young people's digital rights and responsibilities is really urgently needed. So Sonia's been saying that for quite some time. And she says the key question confronting the policy and practice communities, how can we foster children's protection from harm while empowering them? And I feel like we've given up on the empowerment side at this point with what's going on in schools, and I find that really distressing because we must have a rights-based approach. My thing is I work in the area of sex education, and we need to have both digital rights and sexual rights for young people. Young people have rights. They have a right to education. They have a right to be skilled in these technologies in order to use them for their future. And these issues are just not covered enough. Not only are they not covered enough in school, in the curriculum, they're really not even studied enough because it's actually really challenging to research in this field and to get the experiences to work, to understand the experiences of young people. Okay, now I have a little bit of a gear shift because I promised you that I would talk about the post-digital, and I wanted to actually have some notes on this. And this is like our little theoretical interlude in the middle of the talk. Okay, so deep breaths. Okay, so why do we need this concept of the post-digital, or what do I mean by it? People don't like it. as I've said. When we've used it, we've received a lot of blowback, particularly from science and technology studies. We're in the engineering building. I think that the post signals cultural studies for people, and ideas about postmodernism or post-structuralism create tension for people. But it's just this reason that I really love the term. In fact, I was thinking back, I did my master's thesis on the posts, and I was looking at post-structuralism and postmodernism and, post-structural feminism. My first monograph book was called Post-Feminist Education ? Because I was very interested in how the post created this sort of sense of like an after, and I was like, is that even possible? It's just a provocative term to me, like using posts. But how does this relate to the post-digital? So I like the notion of post because it takes us into a discussion about temporality. We are never after phenomenon, but the post marks a moment we can never go back from. So yes, we are digital. Our subjectivities have been forever transformed through digitality and our interface with internet technology, apps, smartphones, and screens in unimaginable ways, really. And this only became more and more enhanced during COVID-19, right? This pandemic experience just massively heightened these digital connections in our lives. So how can we be anything other than post-digital in a post-COVID, post-pandemic world? That's my question. Our experience shifted so dramatically in the pandemic to becoming more at the mercy of the platform economies. We did everything online. We relied on digital connectivity to manage the physical, not social, distancing. From our grocery shopping, our jobs and education, to kids in school, and our screen time, all of our screen time increased dramatically. Our attention and our habits shifted considerably. So, the second reason I think post-digital is really interesting is from a post-human perspective. I've been writing about post-humanism for some time, and when we're doing the digital, we are in relationality with something more than human. We are in relationality with digital interfaces and devices, the screens, the economic matrix I've been discussing. Materially, the smartphone becomes an extension of our bodies. Tanya was saying she loves her phone. She would die without it. Tanya's back over there. It's so true. It's a lifeline. It's an extension of ourselves. The smartphone becomes an extension of our bodies. We're drawn upon and into the energetic flows. We are datified, to quote Deborah Lepton, and our data is continuously mined, and it's extracted out of us unconsciously. We don't even know. I'm wearing my Apple phone. It gives me the stupid bro. It calls me bro. I'm like, dude, can you not? But I don't know how to turn it off. Anyway, it's like, do your rings. It just reminded me before. I'm like, I'm quite busy right now. Anyway, we are in these material interactions continuously. We're part of these actor network assemblages, to use Latour. We are modified through the specific features of the platforms. If we take a platform affordance approach, building on Dana Boyd and others, the devices, they fundamentally change us and our ways of understanding our reality. They create specific vernaculars, new infrastructures of feeling, as Becky Coleman calls them. We're swiping through reality. We get that from Tinder. We're snapping moments in time from Snapchat, which we presented on last week. These are the discursive, affective, and material patternings that no doubt reshape our neural pathways, our automatic responses and nervous systems, as argued by Jodi Dean in her discussion of serotonin hits from social media-like economies. These are not necessarily negative or positive. They merely are in our contemporary post-digital moment. So there's so many amazing concepts I think that we need to be thinking about, and that can come under this broad notion of the post-digital. We're networked, we're hyper-connected, content's highly spreadable. Look, I put up Kiera's slide. We're no longer even just networked, we're algorithmic. I'm not going to take credit, this is my wonderful PhD student, Kiera Ferris, slide about the shift into an algorithmized self in a platform like TikTok, where we are we're part of a recommender algorithm that feeds us what we supposedly like. But does it? Do we like it? Do we have control anymore? So as Kira's arguing, that becomes, the subjectivity becomes passive in that dynamic. Which is something that I don't think I thought about nearly enough when I was first starting out. I was very much like, oh, I'm going to do psychology of the experience, but I didn't really account for how the technology was dramatically reshaping our consciousness and our subjectivity. So we need to be thinking then about how this can shape our ideas of policy and practice. Particularly, for example, in schools, you see schools separating out the digital from how they do their policies. So they'll have like cyberbullying or online safety. But we need to take a much more holistic approach to this. And I think that separating out the digital is done because it's a way to manage the massive responsibilities and the risks and the harms and the legal issues that are involved with young people that are coming up a lot in schools. And so this recent attempt to ban the smartphone, it's just a way of trying to shove the responsibility, I think, back onto parents, even though parents also want it, but like then where's the accountability and how does this affect young people? So I think we really need to be thinking about how we can upskill young people to have the interpersonal skills to understand issues of consent in relation to mobile technology. Who's pushing them to do what online? Why are they being fed algorithmic content such as sex subscriptions or Andrew Tate reels? They need to be thinking about their own consent and what they should share or post or not and why. And they need support when they make mistakes, most crucially. And then the final point there that I wanted to talk about, and I will go through in my research, is how I think we need to think post-digitally in our research methodologies. So Kim, I'll be interested in what you think about that. I've been using a broad range of techniques to understand the more than human. Surveys can measure the incidence or count up the types and frequencies of digital harms. Digital ethnography can help us look at interactions online. Getting young people to kind of provide you with digital material is perhaps a more ethical way that we found our way forward more recently. So all sorts of ways of digital diaries and all sorts of ways that young people can share their experiences without us being sort of invasive or surveilling of them. And I'm going to also be talking about traditional talk-based methodologies and also some arts-based methodologies that I have used to try and help understand and conceptualize what it means to grow up digital. And so that was my provocation around the post-digital. Okay, Tanya? Okay. Oh, I keep going. These were my inspirations of references, but you can have the slides after. Okay, so here's the first 10 years of my research into young people's use of social media. The first one, where's John? Yes, John Potter, and we went to this estate in Croydon.
And you made me talk to young people about romance. And
yes, yes.
They had a lovely conversation with the girls, and I was in a room with them. Baseball hats.
Yeah, but you got some really good data. And I was so lucky that we had Rebecca Willett, who subsequently moved to Wisconsin, I believe, and who showed me so much about how to do this type of research. She was in conversation with Dana Boyd at that time. Just been so privileged, and all these people that I've met at the UCL and the IOE. This was before UCL. We were still just the IOE. It was before the takeover. I've done loads of different projects, and the digital always finds its way through. But I'm going to talk about a few in particular. Oh, here's the Bebo data. Can you believe this is still a Bebo video that works, with the sparkles? I'm that's amazing. These were things that young people shared with us. But Bebo was about sharing the real you. And so it was really fascinating to study the representation of self. And I looked, of course, as I do, at issues of sexualization, pornification, and how sexual double standards were playing out amongst young people on those platforms. I thought I would talk a little bit about this project, which I was very privileged to carry out with Sonia, Livingstone, Vazquez, and Laura Harvey, and we went into schools in 2011 to start look at this new phenomenon of sexting, which was very intriguing to people at the time, and so interesting looking back at the technology. The young people were using Blackberries, and it was really interesting because businessmen were using it for a network, but so were teens, and it wasn't surveillable. So that was a really fascinating thing about it. It wasn't very easy to penetrate their networks, and we saw a lot of interesting things. We also looked at their Facebook platforms. Here's Kamal's branding and swagger, and some of the types of we wrote a whole one lovely paper led by Laura Harvey on boy masculinity and swagger. We talked about different types of currency that were being created through and different types of value through the images. So this is like a picture of someone's boobs that says Dante owns. That's obviously a pseudonym. All pseudonyms, in case anybody is worried about the ethics. So lots of interesting things were coming up. We were using actually Beverly Skeggs' Bourdieusian notions of value to think about this. And very difficult to resist these dynamics for boys. This is a very powerful quote. If they had a picture of a girl naked and you told them that was wrong, they'll think straight away you're gay. So the whole kind of concoction of homophobia built into homosocial heteronormative masculinities. We found this really interesting thing, which was about taking text grabs through something called a screen muncher. And this is a really interesting way of taking a private text and then posting it and sharing it to show something like, wouldn't you love that on top? I'd love you inside me, to be honest. And we looked at all these psychological things, and we argued primarily that technologies act as a new conduit for gender power imbalances. I was thinking about this word, conduit. It's quite neutral, right? And I think back then, and Sonia, you pointed this out when we were at the Association of Internet Researchers last week, we had a sort of less of a understanding of the coerciveness of the features and the platforms and the affordances, and maybe how we needed to work on tech design. And I looked at our recommendations, actually, and we were actually kind of sort of saying we needed more parent control. You did the recommendations, so I approved them, I guess. But we were sort of saying, okay, maybe there's some ways that you can sort of watch what your kids are doing, but we need to have checks on parental surveillance. So we were just sort of finding our ground in that type of early study. I needed a break after that project. I was like, oh my God, no more sexting. It was really, it was a lot, and there was a lot of media coverage, and it was just a lot. So I started studying youth digital activism, which is amazing. This is I was just actually in a project with Caitlin Reguer, who's here for the mayor of London, and we came across this incredible account that was being run by these girls or young people. I think many of them were non-binary actually, running this queer cacti activism Instagram account. And this is way back in 2018, and they had 3,000, they had 4,000 followers. And we just started studying them and doing little offshoots. And I actually had a formal project where we looked at digital feminist activism against rape culture through the Arts and Humanities Research Council with Caitlin Mendes and Jessalyn Keller, and we published a book during this interim. Okay, so we were going on this stream of rape culture and how do we fight against this, and we were invited to a Feminism in Schools conference. Where's Hannah? Yeah, Hannah's a big part of the Feminisms in Schools network in London, and so we were invited to go and deliver these sessions, and I went into the session. And the most dominant theme was girls discussing the biggest challenge on social media was how to handle receiving non-consensual dick pics. So they were saying at one school, a fight broke out because a boy had been sending another boy's girlfriend dick pics. And if another boy, at another school, a boy made a fake account and pretended to be a girl. He contacted a boy, asked for dick pics. The boy sent them, and then the boy with the fake account leaked the pictures around the school. Then I went for lunch at this conference, and one of the frickin' teachers had gotten a dick pic airdropped to her on the train, and I was just like,
5 minutes.
holy shit, really? Damn.
We can.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh my god, that's just nuts. Now I have to study this. So we did. These were just some quotes from that day. With Caitlin Regar, we got together a small amount of money. We didn't know much about dick pics, that's why I put this up here. And we asked, why are dick pics becoming the new normal? We were super lucky that we were able to get funding from the Collaborative Social Sciences to actually run a survey on this after we'd done the qual. And then we actually did the study in Canada, which I'm super proud about, but I don't have time to go into loads of it. What I would like to say is that I think that we really mobilized a sort of a post-digital type of methodology in this project, which I'm extremely proud about. We got the young people to share screen captures and screen grabs. That's them working on a table. And because a lot of the content that they were receiving was disappearing, remember on Snapchat, the evil platform, we got them to draw their experiences, which ended up being phenomenal. An absolutely incredible, still hair-raising for me, experience of enabling young people to sort of sit and reflect about what had happened, what went wrong, and what would they like to do about it. We found so many incredible things. That one's a girl shouting herself out on Snapchat to get more Snap contacts. Betsy? Yep. This is a girl drawing like how boys like do their V-line, just so many different things. We looked at the platform features and affordances. This is the evil Snap map. I don't have time to go into any of this. We looked at how they were getting unwanted content through messaging and porn bots on Instagram. And this is the stuff that got really, really interesting is when they started actually drawing some of the unsolicited content that they got. Boys actually got a lot of different, they were very concerned about being catfished, and they were also very concerned about being pushed and nudged into sex subscriptions. Even though it seemed like they could see through the porn bots quite easily, it was a different dynamic for the girls with the dick pics, which I have argued are weaponized. And in some of our work, we argued that the experience of being together and drawing these experiences was actually quite empowering. Now that didn't go so well because I got that. I can't even. Basically, some politicians got a hold of this, and it went into Parliament, which I was reading out last week, where they were like, basically saying that it was like, wrong to enable young people to talk about this thing and how horrific that, we had done this methodology and charging it to be unethical. That is not the case, and I stand by the fact that the only way to actually understand and address some of these dynamics is to let young people talk about it and to feel comfortable to actually explain what's going on. But we did end up finding that their digital literacy was quite poor, their understandings of abuse was quite poor, and that their reporting was extremely low. So only 2% of people would tell their school that something had happened. We have a book coming out on this. I'm so proud that finally, we also released a report. This study changed the law. It actually led to and informed a new offense on cyber flashing. So we never could have imagined when we attended a workshop for feminism in schools in 2018 that we would actually be frontline and center in the news release from, the government. It's mind-blowing to me. I'm not a cursorial feminist. But I do think that the law can present some kind of important intervention, even if pedagogically, because it's extremely hard to actually prosecute a dick pic because you have to prove intent to harm. So in the end of this book, we argue that we need to hold the government and social media companies accountable. So I think we see a full swing around for me from like, oh, it's so psychologically interesting, to like, actually there's some really coercive power dynamics happening here that are exposing young people to risk and harm that we need to address and do better. And I'm not going to get into the rest, but I know I have like 97 slides. You should come to some of my actual lectures where the kids are just like, would you stop? But I wanted to tell you just about this amazing intervention that we did. We designed participatory workshops on sexual violence, which we piloted with a lot of young people. We ended up working with 1,600 young people with the School of Sexuality charity. And we made a whole bunch of resources too, which I can share. It's in this report. But we're actually making it and launching it on November 28th at 3 p.m. And Georgina from the NEU is going to be a speaker at our launch. We've actually made it into a digital teachers course. So like teachers, and it's going to be free. So teachers can actually access, and thank you for these slides, Kira, these amazing courses that we've created, and they have the different modules, and you can go in and there's videos and all sorts. So we've got understanding sexual violence, educating about gender and sexual violence, tech-facilitated gender-based violence, which they really don't learn about in school to date, and dealing with disclosures and instances of sexual violence. And yeah, that's what I feel passionate about. I think today is a really important day to stand up and say, actually, we do need better digital literacy. We do need better supports for young people. Maybe we're not going to resolve this mobile phone banning thing right now, but like, let's actually think about what young people need. And yeah, adults need to do better.
And I think, what an amazing talk. Thank you. And I'm going to invite 3 colleagues to come up and respond to Jessica's talk. So, I'll invite you up. We have Dr. Lucia Gloria Vazquez, who is a lecturer in digital media production here at UCL. She's a media scholar who specialises in feminist and queer approaches to popular culture, particularly in relation to teenagers, streaming platforms, sexual scripts and gender roles. So welcome and thanks for coming this evening. Thank you. This particular discussant may need little introduction to many of you, but I'll do it anyway. So Professor Sonia Livingstone, Professor of Social Psychology in the Department of Media and Communications at LSE. Sonia's work makes an outstanding contribution to the field, increasingly focused on children's rights in the digital age. And her latest co-authored book is called Parenting for a Digital Future, How Hopes and Fears about Technology Shape Children's Lives, with Oxford University Press. So thanks again for accepting our invite. Last but not least, Professor Andy Phippen, who's a Professor of IT Ethics and Digital Rights from Bournemouth University, and his work's focused on online harms and protection. And Andy's latest paper, which I think just sums it all up, is titled Why Do Legislators Keep Failing Victims in Online Harms? So thanks, Andy, for joining us. So I'll give the floor to you. Maybe we could go in that order, or the other way, as you like.
Would you rather?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So, and I will be strict about time. You've got 5 minutes.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll try not to swear. First of all, Jessica's work continues to inspire and is authentic youth voice for many, many years. I was sort of reflecting on what to say, but I think I'm going to talk a little bit about history. There are 2 people on this stage. Jessica's already mentioned it, that produced a piece of work in 2012. The work was done in 2011 on young people. While it was broadly referred to as sexting, there was a lot of talk about legitimised sexual harassment, not recognising harms, all those sorts of things. And the work came out, as Jessica said, great deal of media interest. The policy sphere went, oh, this is terrible, this is shocking, we need to do something about this. And then I can remember speaking to a policymaker and they went, yes, but they did only go to 2 quite rough schools, didn't they? In 2016, the Women and Equalities Select Committee did an investigation into sexual violence, sexual harassment in schools. I think many of us contributed to that inquiry. I looked it up earlier, I did as well. And a report came out, and lots of people went, oh, this is shocking. Oh, we need to do something about this. And the recommendations were very sensible around it, better sex relationship education and similar. And the government responded, quite a poor response, and it all went away. And then in 2021, if one was being cynical as a response to the fact that everyone's invited, exploded with many, many thousands of disclosures by young people about not only what they'd suffered in schools, but also how they were let down by adults when it happened. Ofsted conducted a piece of research which spoke to young people about these sorts of things in schools, and it was published. And the Secretary of State for Education at the time, Gavin Williamson, was Secretary of State for Education. That's bananas. But anyway, he was Secretary of State for Education, and the head of Ofsted both came out and said how shocking this was. And I just thought, these people are not on top of their brief. And I used to be very passionate about how we as academics have to engage with the stakeholder space. But I'm kind of getting to the point now where I go, it's there. Go and read it. But the problem is, the academic work talks about how complex this stuff is, and these people want easy answers. When I started this work, 2006, my first piece of work in this area is working with BT, speaking to young people about these sorts of things. So what can adults do to support you? There's a better education, adults who don't freak out when we disclose, those sorts of things. I did a similar piece of work in 2022. They said exactly the same things. So I just thought, my career's been a complete waste of time. I'm just going to write about AI like everybody else now. But I do reflect on what more can we as academics do apart from put this stuff out there, and hope people are going to listen, because I think they're looking for the simple answers that there aren't any, because as Jessica so eloquently describes, this is complex stuff and adults need to step up.
Thank you, Andy.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I could, so many things to say and struggle to know where to start. So I'm going to start by saying, Jessica, that was fabulous. And I really love and I think everyone kind of resonated precisely to your kind of portrait of the complexity and the intertwining of digital affordances and young people's lives and their striving and their agency, and you treat them with such respect, but at the same time you find a way of accounting for how they are often overpowered or at risk of being overpowered from incredibly powerful and cleverly designed platforms. And I think that's something that I know I struggle with in writing, and I think it's something we talk about a lot when we go out and we talk to stakeholders, because you want to treat young people with respect, you want to talk about how they have agency and voice and show the kind of experiences of their lives. And yet, we don't want to say the digital native problem. We don't want to say they're all fine. We don't want to say they're coping. We don't want to say everything, no one needs to take any action. And finding that kind of space in between is particularly difficult in a context in which, as both Jessica and Andy have said, the public would just love to panic. And right now they are panicking. And so it is hard to keep that. The space of the complexity, the space of the... there are a lot of terms I'm hearing these days about constrained agency, or kind of, limited spaces for agency, or structured choices, within which young people can navigate, as you say, without being too extreme. So I'm speaking and increasingly working within a child rights framework, and I lead a centre called Digital Futures for Children at LSE with the Five Rights Foundation, and I work with Kim Silwander, who is sitting there, and together we spend a lot of time thinking about whether and how a child rights framing can be helpful, and the word rights were there quite a lot, and I wanted to say very briefly how I think a child rights framework is helpful, and then also reflect some of my disquiet with its limitations around your, I think, very kind of cogent argument for the post-digital. So if we just did a piece in the DFC about what is the evidence for smartphone bans in schools or smartphone policies in schools, for which there is remarkably little, given the amount of public attention that this policy is getting. But we kind of began with an argument, the very concept of bans is anti-child rights. You might actually say anti-child. And sometimes the public discourse slips from banning phones or banning social media to banning children. I always kind of listen to that moment when we've, outed what's really. So a child rights approach, I suppose, I've kind of hitched my work to very strongly now, because it begins with children's agency, but it always recognises that agency is constrained, and adults are creating circumstances in which children grow up. Like Jessica's work, it absolutely prioritises children's voice and their account of what is good for them, but it doesn't say whatever they want should go. And it is profoundly holistic, so it will recognise the need for protection and the need for intervention in terms of education or regulation. But it will never frame that in terms of saying protection is enough. It will always say, where does protection begin to limit children's opportunities for participation or expression, or making mistakes and taking risks and growing up in the way that we know children must do? Where do some of the solutions, in heavy scare quotes, for the problems of the digital infringe children's other rights, their right to privacy, their right not to be discriminated against in a kind of elite and often kind of unequal digital framework? How can, it emphasises the idea of what's called children's evolving capacities, which is quite a neat kind of workaround for the debates that happen about child development and socialisation. So it kind of refuses an ages and stages model and tries to recognise the way in which children grow and develop and mature in many ways, but have their rights throughout. And it insists that rights are indivisible. They cannot be ranked. You can't just work on... So for me, this is a very powerful framework, and it has a kind of authority with stakeholders, but it also doesn't speak to that post-digital agenda, and I thought that's something that we could debate. So we always talk about rights in relation to a digital environment, or rights in a digital world, but not digital rights, because rights are fundamental and human. So post-human kind of troubles me, and I thought we could, that might be something to debate. And I suppose it, even though there are many critiques of rights, and today is about to see a whole new attack on rights, and especially human rights, and UN institutions, and, this is a bad day to be saying anything that I want to say. So it has but nonetheless it's a framing that has a certain kind of weight that mobilises some of the regulators, educators, different stakeholders to begin to make some changes, even though, and as our own reports show, those changes are partial, fragile, very difficult to kind of assess in the long term, and sometimes you think you win here and you lose there. So I want to be kind of realistic about what it can achieve, but also just offer a sense of, picking up on the notion of rights and worrying a little about the post-digital.
Okay. We'll come back to that for sure. So, thank you.
Well, thank you, Jessica, for an amazing talk. I can't tell you how happy I am to be here today with you. You're a fantastic scholar and great friend and a great feminist and queer ally. I'm going to try and be systematic. I have 3 points or 3, I guess, questions for debating that I want to raise. I'm going to try to be systematic because it is incredibly daunting to be sharing this stage with such renowned scholars whose work I've been following for years, and I'm about to panic. So I'll try and be fast. The first thing that sort of caught my attention when I was listening to your talk was this platform Bibo, and how the motto was share the real you. And I sort of wanted to pick on the tensions between the polished and highly self-surveyed images that circulate in social media by teenagers and adults as well, and the fact that authenticity is still perceived as a key value not only by Gen Z, but in general in the affective economies of social media as a tool to get more likes and to get more visibility, etc., etc. And I was just wondering about the links between this need for authenticity and the rise of politically incorrect discourses. I was wondering how this affects teenagers' social media consumption and behavior, because wokenism is not really marketable as something that is as authentic as these politically incorrect discourses circulated by the likes of Jordan Peterson, Andrew Tate, or even Donald Trump. So authenticity, I think, is an interesting concept to discuss and to unpack when we're talking about digital media literacies, politics, anti-feminist rhetorics, queerphobia, and teenagers. Then my second question, or my second point, is connected to the question that you were raising: whose responsibility is social media, and more broadly linked to relationship and sex education and citizen values. While I do agree with you that media literacy is more important or perhaps more useful than a restrictive approach to parental control, or even to a phone ban, no social media, no devices sort of approach, I do remember when I was a teenager, when it was not so long ago actually, my parents didn't allow me to have a phone until I think I turned 16, and that led to me being ostracized from my peers. And at a time where teenagers are spending 9 hours on day per average on their phones, I don't think this would be the right approach. So moreover, current relationships and sex education in UK schools does very, very little to teach young people digital literacy or the perils of disinformation, and it is very unclear whether schools are ready and willing to address the digital mediation of sex and relationships for young people between these framings of risks and abstinence and harms. And this is, again, particularly important in the context of polarization, politically incorrect discourses, etc., etc. So I've been toying with the idea of, applying for a project to teach relationship and sex education, utilizing clips from the TV show Sex Education, which I have researched extensively and I'm a massive fan of. And I was just wondering how, in this post-digital context, we might be addressing the post-digital not just as a framework for approaching this, relationship and sex education with a specific consideration to digital media literacy, but also the post-digital as a methodology, what that might look like. And I was wondering if this is something that we might be able to discuss today together. And then my third point has to do with the different affordances of the various platforms that are utilized by teenagers nowadays, and how perhaps there has been a decrease in agency, community building, self-recognition, and politicization from Instagram to TikTok. My initial approach to social media and identity matters related to teenagers was quite positive and quite hopeful. As someone coming from a largely heteronormative context where queer relationships, queer sexuality was not discussed in my school environment nor in my family environment, social media provided a safe space for me to build a community and have these conversations. But it seems to me that TikTok does not create that space. And I was wondering, what directions our research might take when it comes to non-normative communities and non-normative teenagers' use of social media, and how their agency might be decreasing in this sort of algorithmic self-context where networking and connection to others doesn't matter as much as a sort of narcissistic, I would say, approach to the algorithm and the videos we consume on TikTok. So these are my 3 points.